second explosion hurled gas and rock 18 miles high into the stratosphere. As blazing ashes filled the town, the air was thick with the smell of sulfur and the cries of the victims.
The Pompeii eruption produced a high-rising volcanic cloud, and we had a collapse of the volcanic column, which then destroyed Pompeii. People in Pompeii died essentially by suffocation. In other words, inhalation of the hot volcanic material, such as mixture of gas and ash.
The 2,000 citizens trapped in Pompeii fell where they stood, an end so unforgiving that their contorted forms remain, preserved by that fiery shroud. An entire society condemned by nature. Vesuvius is just one of 500 active volcanoes around the world. Most lie along the lines of fire that circle our planet, cracks and fault lines that mirror the convulsions beneath the Earth's surface. The heart of the planet is hot and turbulent. Deep beneath our feet, some 60 miles down, the temperature is 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt metal. The mix of molten rock and gases produced at these depths is called magma. It rises in red-hot globules until it collects beneath the Earth's cool and brittle crust. If the crust should weaken, a volcano comes to life. Over 500 million people live in parts of the world that are prone to volcanic eruption, but not all of them realize it. February 1943, in the Mexican state of Michoacan, the people of San Juan believe they are being punished by God. Exactly 12 months before, a plague of locusts had stripped their fields bare of crops. Now they are being hit by earth tremors, up to 300 in a single day. Their priest says it's divine punishment for a land dispute with a neighboring village. On February 26th, something extraordinary happened. A clap like thunder, a crack in the ground, and in a cloud of fine dust, the earth heaved itself up. Paracutin, a new volcano is born.
There was steam coming out of the ground. After a few hours, it started to become thicker and thicker. At night, there was fire bursting out of the ground. The flames reached 400 to 500 meters into the air. Who would ever have believed it? A volcano, right there, in a flat field.
The villagers of San Juan didn't even know what a volcano was. They'd never had them in this part of Mexico. Curious geologists began to arrive. For them, it was a lifetime's opportunity to study a new volcano. The local people were less enthusiastic.
I could see sparks coming from the volcano, coming out of the ground and leaping all around. It looked as if they were going to spread everywhere.
The column of ash rose almost 20,000 feet and reached as far as Mexico City, 200 miles away. San Juan took the worst of it. Within 12 months, the volcano cone had grown to 1,100 feet, and the ash fall had killed every plant within 5 miles of the crater. 5,000 cattle and horses were suffocated by the dust.
I used to sweep the roofs of the houses to clear the ash from them. Otherwise, they would have fallen down because of the weight. They got the young girls to do that job because we were lighter.
To the villagers, it was a monster. But the volcanologists found that the volcano was a complex organism. Different parts of it showed different behavior patterns. The central crater produced sulfur, ash, and flying rocks. But on the volcano's flank, the vents gave off quite different gases and lava. A lot of it. The lava flow began on the second day. It would continue unbroken for 9 years. The townspeople were divided. Some said it was time to give up and go. Others were determined not to surrender.
How could we leave our town? This was our place. Our homes were here.
But 15 months after the volcano appeared, Don Celedonio and his neighbors knew they were beaten.
Finally, the day came when we reached an agreement. When the lava reached the gates of the cemetery, it was time for all the people to leave town.
To guide them to a safer place, they took with them a statue from the church, the Lord of the Miracles.
That's when we took the statue of Christ from the church where I was baptized. We left the church and we started walking and walking. There was no road. We walked till we reached a place where there were a few small houses. Then we laid down the Lord of the Miracles and decided to stay there.
The people of San Juan built themselves a new church and a new town. But they cannot forget the village which was taken from them by the volcano.
Yes, it was God who punished us. The priest told us that the volcano was a punishment. It was the fault of our ancestors. The missionaries told us not to go anywhere, that it would be better to do penance and ask God to stop the lava. We went around everywhere on bended knees, on a pilgrimage from church to church. We still do. All the time we ask the Lord not to get angry because we don't want to go through all that again.
The villagers believe it was their prayers that finally caused the eruption to end after 9 years. 50 years later, the old town is abandoned, and the lava field around Paracutin is almost barren of vegetation. But mankind's attachment to the earth is deep-rooted. Not a single human life was taken by the volcano. But as recently as 1990, a new dispute over ownership of the land swallowed up by the lava led to violent disagreement and murder. Climbing an active volcano would reduce most people to thoughtful silence rather than set them singing. Mount Etna, at nearly 11,000 feet high, dominates Sicily and is the largest volcano in Europe. Francois Leguin, a French volcanologist, challenges convention. He refuses to accept that natural forces are beyond our control.
Etna's nature is something very powerful that we understand very little, and we are very small, and we can be destroyed very easily by nature. But I'm convinced that we have to do something.
Orazio Consoli is a mountain guide. He's worked with Francois for nearly 20 years. He knows Etna in all its moods.
Etna is both a mountain and a volcano, so you have both love and hatred for her. We Sicilians do love this volcano. Every morning I wake up just to look at her and see how she is. That's love. But the hatred is for Etna's destruction. I have seen houses and vineyards destroyed by lava, and I know they'll never come back.
Etna's history of destruction is a long one. The ancient Greeks believed that Hephaestus, the god of fire, lived beneath this mountain and made weapons for the gods. The blasts from the crater, they thought, were the sparks from his furnace. In more than 150 fiery eruptions, lava flows from Etna have regularly laid waste to the towns and villages around it. But in 1983, Francois Laguerne decided to defy this natural order, to persuade the lava to flow where he wanted, rather than where it chose to go. Watching the lava flow through its channels and tunnels, he saw how, if a rock happened to fall in, it could form a solid plug that would force the lava naturally to divert elsewhere. He concluded that if he, as a scientist, could block the lava channel in the right place, it would have to turn aside, away from the threatened villages.
My job is to observe. To divert lava fluid, you just observe natural lava diversion. You understand the way they are made by nature, a block falling in the lava tunnel, and then you find a place when you can help nature to divert by itself. You just break the solid crust on the active lava flank, and the lava go another direction.
But to break through and divert the flow, he needed some extra help from high explosives. And to be effective, they would need to be put as close as possible to the red-hot lava, through a hole drilled in the side of the lava channel.
We test explosives, but the problem is when you heat explosives, they can self-detonate because the lava is at 1,000 degrees centigrade. So we test different system of cooling to cool down the explosives. So finally we used cooling using water circulation, just like in your car when you cool the engine. The explosives are inside a tube. At the ultimate phase, they are pushed by compressed air.
It was a calculated risk. Not everyone was convinced it was wise. But shortly after the blast, the lava stream changed its course.
So we succeed to break the lava stream in the main channel. We had a big block taken from the lava side that enter the tunnel systems and obstruct the tunnel system. It is very simple.
On Sicily, they still prefer to put their faith in divine intervention rather than high explosives. For Orazio Consoli, there is a higher power still, the mountain.
I think it is good that men try to control nature. It's important to study a volcano like Etna. Science has to advance and make progress. But Etna is a volcano that we should all respect. At the end of the day, she does exactly what she wants.
Volcano scientists don't always find a welcome from those they are trying to help. 20 million people live in Mexico City. Just 30 miles away lies Popocatépetl, one of the most heavily monitored volcanoes in the world. The last major eruption was in 1720, but its present behavior is now giving scientists serious concern. Each day it blows out large volumes of sulfur dioxide, a sure sign that magma is rising in the chamber beneath it. The 300,000 people who live on the volcano's fertile slopes are mostly farmers. Their approach to Popocatépetl is different from the scientists.
Popocatépetl is an ancient and sacred mountain, a living mountain. It reminds us that the earth is a living being, that Mother Earth and everything that we can see here, the mountain, the rocks, the caves, are all alive.
The custom of bringing gifts to Popocatépetl to guarantee a good harvest is deep-rooted. In caves under the mountain, archaeologists have discovered similar offerings from 2,000 years ago.
In this sacred place called Alcalican, we still keep the old traditions. We venerate the mountain to stay in touch with its spirits.
The volcano is now a restricted zone for all except volcanologists. They make regular visits to check a host of scientific instruments, but their hardware leaves those who live in the shadow of the mountain unimpressed.
There are a lot of people here who are afraid of the volcano, but the people who are closest to the earth are not afraid. Popocatépetl's name means smoking mountain. It does what it has to do. When the earth gives off smoke and gases, it's talking to us.
But the mountain talks to the scientists too. Using remote cameras and instruments, they can measure every breath of its gases, every spasm at its core, and each separate swelling of the lava dome. They can even plot the precise course that the lava would take given different degrees of eruption. Their problem is determining when the mountain will blow. Until they can do that, the local people will put their faith in the old ways.
The people won't leave their houses easily. They have their roots here, and they are ready to die here in their homes. Our grandfathers, the elders, say that nothing will happen, that the volcano is just smoking its tobacco, smoking its pipe. Scientists can't predict the behavior of Mother Earth. When the mountain has something to spit out, then, just like a human being, Mother Earth will do it. And that won't be predictable.
Volcanoes are not predictable. But the most frightening prospect that Popocatépetl may yet offer is not simply the fire within it, but the glacier of ice in full view on the summit. For when extreme elements meet in nature, the consequence for people can be catastrophic. Vesuvius is rightly regarded with respect for its terrible destruction of Pompeii in 79 AD. But Pompeii was not the only city to perish. On the other flank of the mountain, a small seaside town, Herculaneum, also met its end, but under 5 times the weight of volcanic debris. 7 times as many people died here as in Pompeii.
But in Herculaneum, we find mud flows, and we don't find mud flows in Pompeii. The effect of mud flows on the bodies is to carry them away with high speed and trash them against the obstacles and essentially mutilate the body, kill them, and so on.
The violence visited on the people of Herculaneum is apparent. Even more shocking is that their fate foreshadows the identical death of an entire town within our own lifetime. In the volcanic peaks of the South American Andes, the combination of ice and fire is beautiful and deadly. When Nevado del Ruiz, a snow-capped mountain in Colombia, erupted in November 1985, it melted billions of tons of ice in the second most deadly eruption of the century. In the steaming avalanche that followed, 23,000 people died. This was an old volcano, born during the last ice age. It was believed to be dormant. "30 miles away lay the prosperous farming town of Armero. It sat on a rich volcanic topsoil over 20 feet thick. The last eruption had been over 100 years before. Nevado del Ruiz exists because of the slow collision of 2 slabs of the Earth's crust. Deep beneath the mountain, molten rock and gases were building up. Another eruption was inevitable. Small earthquakes gave the first warning, signaling the movement of magma below the surface. Scientists called a meeting with local people to warn them of the dangers. To make their point, they brought along a film.
In September or October, they called a meeting in the church. They showed us a film of the Mount St. Helens volcano. Personally, I just didn't believe it.
Just 5 years before, Mount St. Helens had been like Nevada del Ruiz, a tranquil, snow-capped peak. Then in 1980, it exploded. In the devastating blast, its glacier melted. The mud flow that followed had been completely unforeseen. Now in Colombia, the scientists were fearful of a repeat performance.
We never imagined that what happened there could happen to us. No, we said, that can't happen here.
Some local people were worried. One family even climbed up the volcano to talk to scientists inspecting the crater.
All we knew there was this thing going on up there. In any time, it could come down and do something. I had a wife, I had 3 little girls, and my wife was very worried about all those stories. So it was my idea. We just went up to the volcano. We found this American. He told us that everything was under control, that if anything happened, that there was going to be enough time to evacuate the town before anything could get down here.
But the order to evacuate never came because the authorities did not take the warning seriously. Seismograph readings sent to Bogota were disregarded. And when scientists published a risk assessment, they were accused of damaging property prices in Armero. But property in Armero was about to become worthless. On November 13th came the first massive explosion of steam and ash. The blast was not followed by flowing lava. Instead, the scalding magma started to melt the heavy snow on the volcano's peak. Just 1/10 of the summit's ice cap melted, the first trickle of water turning to a hot and filthy torrent, a pulsating mixture of meltwater, pumice, ash, and boulders. Gathering momentum, it tore down the valley, a wall of dirt over 100 feet high, heading for Armero.
A very big roar came from the mountain, and I knew that was the end of it. We grabbed the little girls, everything turned upside down. I heard another big roar, and it was the mud coming down. And it took the little girl off my arm, and I lost contact with her and everything.
It was midnight when the liquid avalanche hit the town. In the darkness, the hot mud flow bulldozed through the streets. Houses and people alike were engulfed.
We started going down through the town. We would get to walls, and that pressure would knock them down. I remember that I saw lights in the water, and I would ask myself, lights from where? What's happening with the lights? I remember being carried past the dome of the church and then being swept toward the fence post. It was digging right into my chest, and the only thing I could do, because I didn't have my hands free, was to shift sideways a little until I felt the post go through my chest. Then I carried on downstream. There was no time to think, not even time to cry out.
Dawn revealed the agony. The center of Armero had disappeared, its people strewn downstream, indistinguishable from the mud that entombed them.
We started to see around us, and everything was gray. I didn't see blood, I didn't see anything. I knew there were a lot of people, because everyone was crying, "Help me, I'm dying." Screams, crying, wailing. The only thing I could think was that it was the end of the world, and I was living through it. I felt something running down me from the hole where my wound was. It suddenly became very cold, and I thought to myself, what can I do to keep warm? The mud was warm, so I started to throw it on me to warm myself. From this wound, something warm was still coming out. I took some of this mud and put it inside the hole, and so it would stop the flow.
The torrent had carried Cesar Payan almost 10 miles. Amazingly, close by, he found his youngest daughter.
I had to crawl over the mud and over a lot of people very badly injured, dead. It was terrible. As soon as I began to crawl, I found my little girl. I heard her call us. So she was 3 years old, you know. I grabbed her, I put her on my back, and she just grabbed me from my neck as a response that she could feel that I was her father.
At one point, we saw that a man was coming from the mountain. I saw he had a rope and a machete. Are you coming to get us out? No. Give me your gold chain. So he tried to grab a gold chain I had. I said, don't worry, I'll give it to you. And he said, give me your watch and your wedding ring. I said, no, I won't give you the ring. And he tried to take the ring. I still have the scar from when he took it. Okay, I said, but help me. The only thing he said to me was, just die, one more, one less. Who cares?
As rescuers began to arrive, the scale of the devastation became apparent.
It was a dramatic scene. From the air, you could see the whole valley. And then, as you got closer, you could see people moving and animals in the mud. I said, oh my God, this is big. Much bigger than I ever imagined.
The real nightmares were just beginning. Cesar Payan had already lost his wife and 2 older daughters, killed outright in the avalanche of mud. Now, like many others, he would find his surviving child simply vanish, disappearing in the chaos of the relief effort, never to be found.
Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, came a big helicopter with the Red Cross members inside. One of them just came over to me and said, there's your little baby, she looks all right, but why don't you let us take her to Ambalema and we'll give her special medical attention over there. So it was my second big mistake because I never saw her again. They took her, she left with them, and until today, I never saw her again.
Among the corpses of Armero, at least 1,000 people were still alive, but trapped in the morass of volcanic mud covering the town. Among them was Omaira Sanchez, a 13-year-old girl buried up to her neck in debris and water. Her mother, unaware of the tragedy, was 100 miles away in Bogota.
I was at the house where my brother lived. The woman living there knew Omaira. At 6 in the morning, this woman knocked on the door and told us that Armero had disappeared.
Omaira's image flashed around the world, her courage summing up Armero's tragedy. But her mother wasn't told how dangerous her situation was. She had left her daughter 2 days before with family and friends. Now, Omaira was trapped in the debris.
Everyone would say to Omaira, don't worry, we're going to get you out. Don't worry, your mother is waiting for you. And we would start to pull, but she complained that she was hurting all over. So we prayed. We said a prayer together, and I said to God, please, get us out of this. Save our lives.
The water was still rising and the volcanic mud started to settle. The rescuers lacked vital tools.
We were asking for equipment. The helicopters would come full of journalists and cameramen, politicians, the military, but the tools did not come. I remember, we would take the water out with a couple of pans that we found, but with so much mud, after half an hour it would be full of water again, so we weren't really getting anywhere. We'd get the water down so far and then it would come back up again.
On the 3rd day after the eruption, a helicopter finally did arrive with equipment. But Elmira's rescuers found that the water pump they had asked for was broken.
Well, we sort of gave up. I was the first to pull out. I felt helpless. Elmira was very weak by this time. She wasn't talking anymore. She couldn't keep herself up. I stayed there meditating. Maybe half an hour went by. Then I didn't hear anything anymore. I saw people moving away and I said, Elmira is dead.
Finally, Elmira died from a heart attack. She'd been trapped in the mud of Armero for 60 hours. Her mother learned the news on a street corner in Bogota.
There was a young boy selling newspapers. I saw her picture in the paper and I thought, what's this? So I asked the boy. He said to me, that's Elmira. She's died. What do you mean? They were rescuing her. No, he said, she's dead. And so at that moment, what with my tears and my distress, he asked me, are you from Armero then? Yes, I said, I'm from Armero. And Elmira is my daughter.
The body of Elmira Sanchez was left in the mud like those of the other victims of Armero. 23,000 of them. Today, the town is a mass grave. Its people literally buried alive by the volcano above it. 2/3 of the world's active volcanoes encircle the Pacific Ocean in a ring of fire. Sitting at the junction of 3 tectonic plates, Japan has more than 80 volcanoes within its islands. 16 of them are judged to be particularly dangerous, including Mount Unzen on Kyushu Island. A trip to an active volcano can be both a day out for the family and an opportunity to buy health-giving sulfur from the crater's edge. It is a pilgrimage, both of reverence for the power of the earth and of delight in the spectacular violence of its energy. But the price of such a fascination can be a painful one. The pain is even harder for those who had seen the mountain in a different light.
It used to be lovely in every season. In spring, there would be azalea blossom, and in the autumn, golden leaves. It was cool in summer, and in winter there were frost flowers on the trees. It was a beautiful mountain.
Until 1990, Mount Unzen had been dormant for 200 years. Its new threat was recognized by Japanese volcanologists as early as 1966, and it was singled out to be closely monitored. Seismometers and tilt meters were installed in the very bowels of the mountain and were constantly scrutinized. But in spite of all precautions, 43 people died on Mount Unzen, among them 2 of the most experienced volcano watchers in the world. French volcanologists Maurice and Katja Kraft had devoted their lives to filming volcanoes. They wanted to help people understand their danger. They had concluded that the most devastating weapon in the volcanic arsenal was not lava, but a phenomenon called pyroclastic flow, the kind of blazing avalanche of hot ash, rock, and gas thought to have swallowed up Pompeii. Here at Mount Augustine in Alaska, the Crafts had filmed one at close range. Their footage shows a glowing torrent of ash and gas, so hot that it glides down the mountain at over 100 miles per hour. The immense temperatures mean that everything in its path is incinerated. On this occasion, the Crafts got out just in time. Now, in Japan, they were hoping to see more pyroclastic flows at Mount Unzen.
The crafts always raced to the site of a new eruption, wherever it was, within a couple of days, from wherever they happened to be in the world. They had filmed pyroclastic flow before. They knew how dangerous it is.
At Unzen, the crafts found themselves competing with journalists who had already taken shots of the eruption. The media were beginning to be complacent about the danger. Masayuki Sato was a local taxi driver working for television crews.
I was hired to drive for lots of different news crews. I took them wherever they wanted to go. We saw debris flow and pyroclastic flow. They filmed both. In the daytime, the clouds looked like powerful black thunderheads. At night, we'd say, "Oh, that's beautiful."
Looking for better shots, the television news crews had started to cross freely into the danger zone. The crafts went along with them.
Despite the warning given by Japanese volcano experts, I guess they made their own judgment that it was all right to go into the danger zone. They could see the Japanese media in there ahead of them, already filming the volcano.
As they waited for the eruption, Maurice and Katja were relaxed and confident. A close encounter with pyroclastic flow would, after all, be nothing new.
In Augustine volcano in Alaska in '86, we have seen pyroclastic flows going just in front of us, 40 meters, from 40 meters, like trains.
You have very few around the world, and they are not common, so it's very interesting.
I am never afraid, because I have seen so much eruptions in 23 years that even if I die tomorrow, I don't care.
In June 1991, under lowering sky, Mount Unzen finally gave the news crews the pyroclastic flow they had been waiting for. As the burning cloud headed down the mountain, Masayuki Sato was in radio contact with a fellow taxi driver. Down the mountain, Hatsuko Sakawe was in her abandoned house collecting her belongings.
There was noise and strong smell. Everything was gray, just gray all over the place. I tried to escape, but there were power lines falling. When I turned back, I saw my house on fire.
My friend radioed me saying, "I can't get out of this. How about you?" I said, "Me neither." I put the microphone down and braced myself. I could see it coming this way. It was so fast, about 100 kilometers an hour. Then all the stones hit the windscreen. Our taxi base was calling for my friend over the radio. They knew that we were both up in the mountain. I answered, but my friend didn't.
Maurice Kraft chose a camera position away from the pyroclastic flow. But then there was a fatal shift in the wind. The burning avalanche turned quickly towards Maurice and Katja. They were killed instantly. When their bodies were eventually recovered, it was their friend and colleague, Professor Camo, who had to formally identify them.
It was very easy to identify Maurice Kraft because he was such a big man. You know how charcoal is made? The carbonized wood remains the exact same shape as the original tree trunk and branches. Well, his body was just like that. Pyroclastic flow can reach over 1,000 degrees centigrade, so the fluids in the human body evaporate instantly. That's why every part of his body remained intact. You could recognize the features of his face even though everything was carbonized.
Altogether, 43 people died during the few seconds of that glowing avalanche, volcanologists, journalists, and local people alike. Even as they died, elsewhere on the Pacific's ring of fire, another volcano was stirring itself awake, and this one would shake the greatest superpower in the world. For almost 100 years, the Philippines had been a dependency of the United States. Now the treaty for the U.S. military bases was up for renewal, and many Filipinos wanted them closed. What no one foresaw was that the forces of nature would make the decision. Mount Pinatubo lay in clear view of Clark Air Force Base. By 1991, the volcano had been dormant for over 600 years. For the Eta tribespeople who lived on its slopes, the rich volcanic soil provided a good living. They called the mountain Apo Malyari.
Apo Malyari is our god. Everything we had before the eruption, good life, fertility, food, peace, was given to us by her. That's why all the Eta people praised her. We loved her.
Even when explosions of steam began to appear, the Eta people did not feel alarmed.
The people are not afraid of it because it is the sign of a good harvest for them. It is a traditional belief that whenever they go to till the land or wherever they go at the foot of the Mount Pinatubo, it's a good sign for them.
The first thought of the U.S. military, too, was that Pinatubo might just be letting off steam. But when their seismographs recorded swarms of hundreds of earthquakes per day, they knew that a catastrophic eruption could come at any time.
We could see it. And initially, we didn't think we were that vulnerable. But the fear started to grow slowly. And once we got, I guess, into early June, we knew we'd had a monster over there behind us.
In the beginning of June, gas measurements showed a sudden and massive fall in the amount of sulfur dioxide coming from the crater. It seemed that the main vent could have become blocked. If so, the pressure could only build. The decision was made to evacuate.
I got a phone call from my commander. He said, well, we need to go on the air with a special announcement of evacuation process. The signal to evacuate was given at dawn when volcano experts detected a slight increase in activity from Mount Pinatubo last night.
60,000 local residents and 18,000 airbase residents were evacuated. One small group was staying behind. They included security police, volcano scientists, and to report for U.S. Air Force News, Flight Sergeant Rusty Barfield.
When I was left here, it was just a ghost town. No one in the streets, no one in the stores. We were here for 3 days just waiting for something to happen. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but the volcanologist told us something's going to happen.
What happened was a series of violent explosions. On June 15, Mount Pinatubo finally blew.
Is the alarm going off? Are we being evacuated?
And I saw some security policemen just jumping into a truck. Rusty, get out of here, get out of here. And they're pointing up. And I look up, and it was incredible. I just ran inside the station, screaming top of my lungs, the volcano is blowing up.
We need to get out of here. Let's go.
This sucker's huge this time.
And we're just tearing down the road, probably 70, 80 miles an hour. And I'm trying to shoot video out of the van of the volcano. Everyone was very, very scared. I never imagined being that big. It was just overpowering and just bellowed and bellowed and bellowed.
Forming a cloud 10 miles wide, the ash was thrown 130,000 feet into the sky. And from Pinatubo, there now came scorching pyroclastic flows in all directions.
We were having thoughts that, are we actually going to live through this? Because it was almost like an engulfing power over you.
It was a power that overwhelmed Americans and Filipinos alike. The Eta tribespeople saw a new face to Apo Malyari.
They have fear now because of the trembling of the Mount Pinatubo. It sounds like a machine like bulldozer, a groove, and like trembling. That's why the people are very afraid. They are thinking it is the end of the world.
As the ash cloud rose, the sky darkened until the sun was completely obscured. The volcano turned day to night.
It was about 11:30 in the morning. It started getting a little bit darker and darker, and pretty soon, I mean, it was pitch black. You couldn't even see the hand in front of your face. So I went ahead and did the stand up there.
It's a little bit larger than ash is what's falling right now from Mount Pinatubo, which has been erupting steadily all afternoon. We've also had a number of earthquakes and even some thunderstorms on a wild afternoon in the Philippines.
We couldn't see much, but we could smell the sulfur. We could smell the ash, feel the ash coming down on you. Everything was just in darkness.
White ash fell to earth in ghostly drifts a foot deep. For 100,000 Filipino refugees, every step was misery.
It was a very intense time, and you think, these people, they're walking by us, they've lost their homes, and they really don't know where they're going. Actually, a lot of us felt, you know, almost a little bit guilty. We had vehicles, we had food. They were just carrying whatever they had, and most of them were walking.
But in the face of Pinatubo, the most powerful military might in the world was also helpless. The shroud that covered Clark Air Force Base marked the end of an era for the United States in the Philippines.
Clark was just a blanket of gray. It just looked like the moon. It was just dead. Everything was just dead. The foliage, the grass, the trees, everything was just consumed by the ash. We knew then that this base would never be the same again.
After 100 years, the American flag was lowered in the Philippines. But Pinatubo had not finished yet. On the volcano's slopes, ash from deep inside the earth now lay in drifts hundreds of feet thick, and the typhoon season was starting. Torrential rain triggered volcanic mudflows down the river valleys of the mountain. They carried away roads, bridges, entire villages. Hundreds of people were killed. 400,000 more left homeless. Today, 6 years of volcanic mudflow have left an alien landscape around Pinatubo. A desert pockmarked with forgotten houses and half-buried monuments. For the people of its submerged towns, the past is already a dusty dream. Like a latter-day Pompeii, the eruption of Mount Pinatubo served notice of the immense power of the earth and the transience of mankind. But rather than give up, people here have chosen to build up, to raise their houses on stilts to what they hope is a safe level. They are trying to outwit nature. The memory of Pompeii is a potent and universal one, of a people who were swallowed alive by the earth. Yet even where Pompeii and Herculaneum fell, successive generations have built again. Mount Vesuvius remains a threat, the only active volcano on mainland Europe. But 3 million people now live beneath it. Today, a Pompeii eruption could kill 200,000.
This place is a contradiction in terms because this place looks like an enchanted land. Beautiful scenery, beautiful weather, easy life. But on the other hand, in the background, we have a monster. And that monster is now a sleeping giant, but that sleeping giant will awake again.
Like all who live in the shadow of a volcano, the citizens of Naples believe they have special protection from nature. Through their city's patron saint, they hope to stave off indefinitely the catastrophe of volcanic eruption. Around the world, 500 million others share their predicament and feel the same. For while volcanoes may take life away, they also enhance it. The eruption that blights one generation yields an abundant harvest for later ones. And the magnificence of volcanic eruption is inseparable from the destruction that accompanies it. In their violence and their beauty, we glimpse the heart of our planet, our own deepest fears and highest aspirations.
To learn more about Savage Earth, visit PBS online at the internet address on your screen.
A tsunami warning and watch are in effect.
Next time on Savage Earth, how earthquakes trigger killer waves.
It was 20 or 30 feet, just a mountain of ocean moving.
There are a lot more people who are now exposed to the effects of a tsunami than existed a generation ago.
Savage Earth is available on home video cassette for $19.98 each, or $79.98 for the 4-part series. To order, call 1-800-336-1917 or write to the address on your screen. Funding was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the annual support from viewers like you.
This is PBS.
Charge him! The case is closed.
Before hanging a man, I prefer to be sure he's guilty.
Did you kill Max van der Verst?
You failed Job. You failed Elihu, so now you're running away, just like you did in London.
That's not why I left London, and you know it.
I know the man I fell in love with wouldn't be running away. He'd stay and fight.
Trevor Eve stars in Heat of the Sun, next time on Mystery.
No!
Thursday night at 9 on KNME. KNME's Ready to Learn service, providing fun educational programs for kids and workshops for parents and caregivers, is funded by Don Chalmers Ford, committed to furthering the quality of education for New Mexico students in order to create a better tomorrow. From From the political intrigues of budget battles at the state capitol to perhaps a light-hearted feature on horse gentling, In Focus serves up a blend of information and cultural features. Every Friday and Saturday night, host and award-winning producer Arcy Chapa provides public television's statewide audience with in-depth analysis of major news events and entertaining features about the people and colorful places that make New Mexico the land of enchantment. In Focus, Friday at 7, Saturday at 6:30.
Her future was written when her uncle gave Julie her first camera. Julie Dash credits the influence of pioneer filmmakers for her 1992 critically acclaimed Daughters of the Dust, the first full-length feature film produced by an African-American woman.
I'm Paul Kangas with a Business News Brief. A handful of big mergers in the energy field today. Dominion Resources is buying Consolidated Natural Gas for $8.4 billion, and Sempra Energy is acquiring KN Energy in a separate deal worth $6 billion. The U.S. stock markets were in rally mode today, and rally they did. The Dow Industrial Average gained 212 points to close at 95.52. That's now less than 100 points from a record new high. The NASDAQ Composite Index rose nearly 59 points. The American Exchange Index up 7.5. One of the most recognized brand names in the world is taking drastic steps to stay that way. Levi Strauss is closing half of its plants in North America, laying off 1/3 of its workforce in order to fight slumping jeans sales. Tomorrow, First Call's Chuck Hill, wrapping up this quarter's earnings results. For more financial news, tune into the Nightly Business Report, weekdays on this public television station.
At a time when few black men even got to college, Paul Robeson did and took top honors in all fields. And then he dazzled the world.
The most famous black man in the world.
In 1939, he was as big a figure as Madonna.
They cheered the singer, but booed the activist. Find out why. See Paul Robeson, Here I Stand.
Very glad to be back.
An American Master Special.
Wednesday night at 9 on TV5.
Presenting history's best on PBS.
It was never supposed to happen.
There is a general emergency at Metropolitan Edison Company's 3 Mile Island nuclear
Safety
power
systems
plant.
functioned as they should
It was
have.
the first step in a nuclear
Pregnant women
nightmare.
and preschool-aged children leave the area until further notice.
It was more maybe the Titanic sort of mentality. This plant was so well
The
designed.
question was, why didn't we notify the people?
Meltdown at 3 Mile Island. Tonight on The American Experience. Major funding for The American Experience is provided by the annual financial support of PBS viewers like you, and by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to enhance public understanding of the role of technology. The foundation also supports the Sloan Technology Series, a collection of books chronicling the major technologies of the 20th century.
Each American experience is made possible by Liberty. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
And by Scott's Lawn Care Products. With Scott's Turf Builder, anyone can turn their own little piece of America into a place to be cherished, season after season after season.
Hello, I'm David McCullough. Welcome to the American Experience. Fear of powerful forces let loose by amazing machines and amazing science is an old story in American life from as far back as the days of steam. You remember the scene in Huckleberry Finn. It's night on the river, and suddenly a steamboat bursts out of the dark and the fog, bearing down on Huck and Jim on their raft. And all of a sudden she bulged out big and scary with a long row of wide-open furnace doors shining like red-hot teeth. There was a yell at us and a jingling of bells to stop the engines, a powwow of cussing, and as Jim went overboard on one side and I on the other, she came smashing straight through the raft. Our film is about another moment of terror on another American river in our own atomic age. The year was 1979, yet here again were furnaces big and scary, but they were nuclear. And again there was a very big powwow of cussing, but this time among citizens, scientists, and officials. This was reality, and as word spread, the terror was felt everywhere. Even after so many years, the thought of what could have happened is enough to stop the heart. Many of us remember where and when we heard the first bulletins from 3 Mile Island. Though far away, I felt particularly connected. Our oldest son was in college in Pennsylvania, less than 100 miles downwind from the site. And the governor of the state, Dick Thornburg, was an old friend from boyhood. I tried to imagine what it was like for him with all those lives at stake. Meltdown at 3 Mile Island.
It was built on a sandbar called 3 Mile Island in the middle of Pennsylvania's Susquehanna River, just 10 miles downstream from the state capital of Harrisburg. The plant's state-of-the-art Unit 2 reactor had been generating electricity for nearly a year.
3 Mile Island was something, you know, you'd go to the river and you'd say, wow, look at that power plant, look at those big steam towers. And I was just amazed, wide-eyed, and you know, looking at the thing, and it was just kind of neat. It was high technology, and this was going to be power that was too cheap to meter.
People in the communities surrounding the plant had grown accustomed to the giant concrete fortress. For them, Wednesday, March 28, 1979, began like any other day. They didn't yet know that events leading to the worst nuclear accident in American history had already been set in motion. It started in the pre-dawn hours with a simple plumbing breakdown. Then a small valve opened to relieve pressure in the reactor. But unknown to the plant operators, it malfunctioned and failed to close. This in turn caused cooling water to drain from the open valve. The nuclear core began to overheat. Technical failures were then compounded by human error. Confronted by baffling and contradictory readings, the operators shut off the emergency water system that would have cooled the core.
If the operators had not intervened in that accident at 3 Mile Island and shut off the pumps, the plant would have saved itself. They had thought of absolutely everything except what would happen if the operators intervened anyway. So the operators thought they were saving the plant by cutting off the emergency water, when in fact, they had just sealed its fate.
Within minutes, the control room console went wild. Hundreds of lights started flashing, accompanied by piercing horns and sirens. One operator recalled that the console was lit up like a Christmas tree.
There was such an avalanche of alarms that the operators couldn't really address any of those on a real-time basis. They were just catching up and trying to prioritize and handle the most important ones and do what they could.
There was so much data being dumped to the computer, and the process was so slow in getting it analyzed and printed out, that when they'd go to look for data from their computer printout, it wasn't there until an hour and a half later.
By early morning, the exposed part of the core was beginning to cook. Temperatures in the reactor were already reaching 4,300 degrees. At 5,200 degrees, meltdown. A scenario called the China Syndrome.
The core could have turned into a molten white-hot mass. It could have gone through the concrete base of the plant and into groundwater, which is immediately below the foundation of the plant, could have fractured the earth instantly in all directions, and geysers of radioactive steam would have spouted into the air through the parking lots. And a cloud of death would have wafted north over the city of Harrisburg.
Operators remained convinced that the core was covered and safe. No one in the control room could see that 3 Mile Island was hurtling towards meltdown.
Most of us who had spent our lives in this business didn't believe that could happen. We had a mindset that said we had these marvelous safety systems which had backups of backups. So there was that mindset that I think made it hard for people to really come to grips with the reality that severe damage had occurred.
As the operators struggled to make sense of the accident, workers throughout the plant flocked to the control room.
By 6:15, the control room must have had 50, 60 people in it, more arriving every moment. And then they get the alarm, radiation in the control room. Well, that's got to be a heart stopper.
Contaminated water from the open valve had leaked into an adjoining building and was releasing radioactive gases throughout the plant. With radiation threatening to escape to surrounding communities, Supervisor Gary Miller declared the first general emergency ever to arise at a nuclear power plant in the United States. The operators, grabbing their respirators, would remain at the helm of the runaway reactor. The radiation level inside the containment dome was reading 10,000 rems per hour. A dose so high, only minutes of exposure would prove fatal. For 4 hours, 3 Mile Island had smoldered in silence. Shortly after 8 a.m., a local radio station began picking up the first hints of trouble.
We first learned that something was wrong at 3 Mile Island because our traffic reporter, he's out driving around, and he says, you know, I'm getting things on the scanners here. He says, are you picking this up? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, well, apparently they're mobilizing some fire equipment and emergency people at 3 Mile Island. And he said, oh, by the way, there's no steam coming out of the cooling towers. So now I'm thinking, something's really weird going on there. I called 3 Mile Island, and